What's your name?
My name's Lena.
My name's Hayden. Great
Nice to
to meet you. Yes, you want me just to start by explaining my position on abortion or on why I think morality requires God?
I guess morality requires God. So
Okay.
It's like the way I read it
Okay.
first, yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that in order to have an absolute, unchanging standard of morality, you have to have an eternal, unchanging God whose standards of morality don't change.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that's the Christian God because I'm a Christian. And the
Okay.
way that I arrive at that conclusion is basically this. I'd say moral judgments are statements. For example, it is better to love your neighbor than hate your neighbor, right? That's a statement.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also say moral judgments are abstractions, or in other words, mental constructions separate from the physical thing they represent. So for example, if I was to say it is wrong to rape a woman, that is a mental construction of what we're imagining, right? Separate from the actual physical event of a man raping a woman. So I'd say, okay, if moral judgments are statements and abstractions, and we want to have an absolute, unchanging, eternal standard of morality that would say rape has been wrong 1,000 years ago and rape will be wrong 1,000 years from now, well, then we need to have an eternal, unchanging mind because both statements and abstractions require a mind, right? If there was no minds in the whole world, there would be no statements and there'd be no abstractions because there's no mental constructions that can represent the physical things, right? Because there's no minds. So that'd basically be the argument, is that there has to be an eternal, unchanging mind in order for there to be an unchanging, eternal standard of morality.
So we're talking about like minds and like, societal standards here. And in my personal opinion, I'm going to respect your opinions here. I personally do not believe that you need like God or Christ to be moral. I think that if you need a higher power to tell you not to do something, then I feel like that's something wrong with like you personally. If that's the one thing stopping you from doing it, that's just my personal opinion, of course. I think that you should just know rape is wrong. Like, things like that is wrong and like just not do it. I don't think you need to like, praise God to.
Yeah, I actually want to touch on something you said. So I would say that atheists, people who don't believe in God, I think they can behave morally, and I think many of them actually do behave morally, and I'm very grateful for that. But I would say in the Christian worldview, the reason that they know that things like rape are wrong and that stealing is wrong and lying is wrong and committing adultery or cheating on one's wife is wrong is because they have God's law written on their heart. But I want to actually ask you to consider something, right? You on my left, I assume you would say rape and murder, those things are evil, they're wicked, they'll always be wrong, and they've always been wrong, right? But let's say I have an atheist on my right who says, I actually think that raping a woman is a good, moral, happy thing and that it should be legal. Well, the problem now is I have you on my left with a chemical reaction in your brain saying rape and murder, always wrong, always have been wrong, and always will be wrong. But on my right, I actually have an atheist whose chemical reaction in his brain says, no, raping a woman is a good, moral, happy thing and it should be legal. But now I have to actually decide, okay, well, which chemical reaction is right? And in atheism, I don't think you actually can make a judgment there because he's saying he's right, you're saying you're right, but there's no final arbiter to say who's right and who's wrong. Whereas in the Christian worldview, I can say, no, I know that rape has been always wrong and will always be wrong because God has spoken.
Do you guys know that abortion is in the Bible?
It's not, and you are interrupting. I'm happy to have you sit down and talk later. But yeah, do you see what I'm saying about the chemical reaction thing? How there's no actual concrete standard. All we have is competing chemical reactions.
I suppose I can understand where you're coming from with that, but it is mostly like the societal standards of what is wrong and right, and like when it comes to like the hypothetical atheist on your right, like I don't really know my personal stances on God and stuff. I got raised in a Catholic school and stuff like that, but I don't really participate in any particular religion. But I think the difference between me and the atheist on your right isn't the fact that he's non-religious. I think it's the fact that he's evil if he thinks that those things are okay.
Yeah, but I want you to consider something though. Me and you both say, yeah, he's evil, he's wicked for having those beliefs. But
not for being an atheist, but
for having the beliefs
yeah.
about rape and murder, right? But when I look at him and I say, I know that's evil because God has spoken. I have an objective, absolute standard that's public, right? It's public revelation in the Bible because God has spoken. But in your worldview, when you call him evil, he says, no, actually, you're evil. And what would be your response to him to show him he's wrong?
I don't think there's anything that can necessarily me be like, oh yeah, you're wrong, other than the societal standards that we have put in place over hundreds and thousands of years. Yeah, obviously murder is wrong, take another human life is wrong, and obviously rape is wrong. Doing something like that to a human being is morally incorrect, and if he doesn't believe that, then it is what it is. But I can't really change someone's mind like that if they're dead set on thinking evil things like that. There's nothing much like that is in me or anyone's power. And yes, there are some people where it's if they find God, or if they change their beliefs, then yes, they can be better people. But again, I don't feel like if you need God, if you need a higher power to tell you to not do things, I feel like that is just wrong.
Well, you said this a couple times. Like, if you need a higher power to tell you not to do things, then that's wrong. Well, one, I'd say, well, by what standard is wrong? But also, I'd say, let's assume for a second that there is no God. If I'm to take that assumption, even though I'm a Christian, let's just assume for the argument, I say there is no God. Well, in that case, there is no ultimate objective standards of good and evil. And so if it's actually in my self-interest to lie, cheat, steal, cheat on my wife, commit murder, commit rape, well then, why shouldn't I in the atheist worldview? So for example, I'll let you respond to that first before I give an example.
Why should it? It's just morally wrong. Like
Says who though? If there's no God,
society says
society. So
yeah.
what about when society said it was okay to kill Jews or kidnap and enslave black people from Africa, or when marital rape was legal in the U.S.?
I don't think a majority of people thought that it was okay to kill Jews. Just the crazy people in Nazi Germany. That's why people eventually intervened and was like, stop doing this. But you know, evil people do evil things at the end of the day.
But I want you to think about something. What if the majority of people 100 years from now said that raping women would be okay? I think you and I would both say, well, even if the majority of people said that, it's still absolutely wrong, right?
Yeah, I would say that there are, when it comes to specifically like the African American example that you like broke out, not African American, just I like enslaving African people, African Americans. That still happens to this day, unfortunately, and people use God as an excuse for that stuff. People have used God as an excuse to murder people for like all of time.
Can I ask you a question about that though? When we say like people have used God as an excuse to like kidnap and enslave black people from Africa, and that happened in the U.S. in the early 1800s.
Either. It's just like it's
anyone,
many
right?
demographics of people.
Yeah, but I would say if I look at a Christian in the South who has a plantation and is saying it's acceptable for me to kidnap and enslave black people from whatever country, I can actually look at him and say, no, I know that that's absolutely wrong, because God actually says in Exodus that if you kidnap and enslave someone, it's actually worthy of the death penalty. Okay. So I can look at him and say that's absolutely wrong, and that's what the Christian abolitionists did in the U.S. That's why they were actually able to abolish the slave trade both in the U.S. and in Great Britain. William Wilberforce was able to look at God's word and say, no, this is wrong, it's wicked, the slave trade needs to end. And so in that case, when I'm talking to that slave trade, I can say, no, it needs to stop. But in your worldview, when he's saying, no, I want to go ahead and kidnap and enslave black people, and I think God says it's okay, but I can correct him and say it doesn't. And I don't think you'd have an argument against him, but also I'd point out what he's doing in pulling from the Bible, that would actually be an abuse of the Bible, not a proper use of it, right? Because a proper use of it would actually say, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. There's unfortunately a lot of people that misconstrue, misuse, and take the words of the Bible just to use it for their own twisted worldview. It's unfortunate that happens, because I feel like deep down Christianity and Catholicism, whatever else, is like a good thing and can be a good thing. It's just the amount of people that have abused it it's really unfortunate, and it pushes people away from religion.
Yeah, amen.
Me personally, when it comes to religion, I just haven't really like been super connected to it, I guess. Like my family has, my like grandparents have, and I went to church like every Sunday for a long time when I was little, but it's just like I haven't been really thrilled to do stuff like that. It's just like and I would say like there's a good amount of people in America. There's actually a group called the Nones that are just not particularly religious. They might say that they do believe in something, but it's just like they're not particularly like, oh yeah, let me go to church, stuff like that. And I'd say like, I don't know, I just don't really like feel super connected to the whole religion thing.
Can I ask you a question about that? So you said it sounded like you grew up Catholic, right? How do you think that we are justified before God? Or how do you think Christians and what the Bible teaches about how we can be justified before God? Do you think that it's solely by putting our faith in Christ? Or do you think it's by faith plus works, kind of working our way to our salvation?
I think that every human has to work to make themselves a better person. And like if in a religious standpoint, I feel like you constantly have to work to be able to have your place in heaven. I once heard some crazy people out here one day say, like, I asked this woman, I was like, hey, so like if, let's say Hitler asked on his deathbed to get into heaven, because he goes back to Christ in the last second, and she was like, yeah, he might get into heaven. I was like, that's insane. That's some crazy work right there.
I want you to think about something. So you said that you kind of had heard that it might be faith plus works, but if you actually look at Ephesians 2 verses 8 through 9, it says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, not a result of works, so that no one may boast." There's nothing that you or I or anyone, or even Hitler, could do to work his way to salvation. The Bible teaches that none of us are righteous, all of us are sinners, and because God is holy and a just judge, the only way that we can enter into his presence and into heaven is if we are standing there in the perfect righteousness of Christ. And the only way that we can do that is by putting our faith in Christ. So there's nothing that I could do, nothing that Hitler could do, and nothing that you could do to actually work our way to our salvation. And this is something that actually I would say the Catholic Church gets wrong. They get some things right. They get Trinity right. They get who Jesus was right. But they believe that it's faith plus works, but that's not what the Bible teaches. We see clearly Ephesians 2 verse 8 to 9. You don't got to take my word for it. You can look it up later. It says, "For by grace you've been saved through faith, not a result of works, that no one may boast." And what's really beautiful about that is that we don't have to put our faith and then work towards God. We can actually be reconciled and have peace with God now, solely by putting our faith in him.
That's fair, I guess. I don't really have much like standpoint. I feel like I obviously like if you believe in God and whatever, props to you. I feel like it's good to have like some sort of faith. For some people, like, you know, it doesn't really matter to them, so I don't really care that much what you do as long as you're happy at the end of the day. That's what I personally care more than anything. As long as people are happy, you do you. You know, as long as it isn't like evil stuff that you're doing that makes you happy, then you may deserve less than other people.
Yeah, but I want you to think about something though. What's evil, right? Because if we don't have an eternal, unchanging mind that it can account for these moral absolutes that would say that rape is always wrong, well then all we have is disagreement, and really it's just might makes right. Like if 70% of people are able to gain enough power and oppress the other 30%, say enslaving them, raping their women, things like that, well, what standard can we object to them doing that? Only if we have an absolute, unchanging view of morality, which I'd say requires God.
That's a fair opinion to say that you think it requires God. I just think that requires just like a good like heart and empathy for other people. I don't think that it's that you need to believe in God to be like a good moral and like a decent human being. But
whose perspective of good though? Because like I said, am I right? I might have someone, whether they're an atheist or a Christian, whoever they are, they might say, well, raping a woman is a good, moral, happy thing, right? So whose perspective?
I would say, I don't know, at that point it's so like again societal expectations, and you said like, oh, like society could change 100 years and like rape could be like, oh, people could be like, oh yeah, rape good. I don't really know what to say in that specific instance. That just shows like a majority of people have gone a bad way, but I don't know, I'm pretty set on the standpoint myself that you don't need God to be like a good human being. Unfortunately, like this isn't like a change my mind kind of thing. I'm just like that's just what I believe, unfortunately.
Well, it was a lovely conversation.
Yeah, we could talk about abortion as well.
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry, I totally forgot about the second sign. Sorry about that. Yeah. So do you want to start by stating what you think about abortion, or I'm happy to state what I think?
You can go first.
Okay. Yeah.
I can try and work in a conversation. Sorry, I'm not the best at like conversating.
No worries. I'm not either. I'm actually I'm kind of socially awkward, to be honest.
Yeah, me too.
But I would say my position on abortion is that human life begins at fertilization. When sperm meets egg, you now have a new unique human being. I believe that we should give human rights to all human beings. And since from fertilization we have a new unique human being, I think they should have a right to live. So I think that mothers and the child that they're pregnant with should both be cared for, both be loved, and both be respected. And they should both be protected by law from being murdered. So I think that from fertilization, the child should be protected from being murdered. If a mother or a boyfriend or a husband kills that child in the womb intentionally, I think they should be charged with murder. Sounds harsh, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does sound a little harsh. I think that me personally, I view abortion as like if the health of the mother is in jeopardy, of course, I feel like the health of the mother should always be the priority. And then after that, I feel like, I know it's a like eventual human, but I feel like if a person or family is not able to take care of a child, they have every, right to get abort it and not have to, because I feel like growing up in poverty is an awful thing. I feel like, I personally didn't have to experience that, but I've heard, I've had friends and I've, heard a lot of people that experience growing up in poverty, or even growing up in the foster care system. It's not something that I would wish upon someone to live through. And I feel like, I don't know if death would be a better fate. Obviously, I don't know, but
I think we actually do know that the death wouldn't be a better fate, because if we had someone who was born into a really poor situation, keep in mind I'm saying like born, right? So they're out of the womb now, and they're in a really rough situation. They're in poverty, maybe inner city Chicago. Maybe both their parents just died in a car accident. Now they might be entering the foster care system. I think you and I would both say, no, we shouldn't be allowed to murder them. We should actually care for them, love them. We should actually work to fix the foster care system, because the children in there deserve love. They deserve to be cared for.
I could agree with that.
Yeah, but I think neither of us would say you should murder the child because they might have a rough life. But I would just want you to push you to consistency with that and say, okay, if the child in the womb might have a rough life, if maybe their parents are in poverty, maybe they'll be raised in a difficult situation, I think we should be consistent then and say, no, we should actually care for and love for those children and not allow their parents to murder them.
I can agree with that if America was in a position where they actually cared about unborn children. From my perspective, it seems they care more about controlling what women do. That's just my perspective. I could be wrong. I could just be woman moment. But I just feel like America cares more about controlling what women do, controlling their bodies, and making sure they have a next generation of a working class than actually caring about the unborn children. And I feel there's so many people that don't want kids to have free meals in schools. I don't care if my tax dollars go to a kid's free meal in school. That's ridiculous. And a lot of other things where it's just we are not benefiting the children in society. So that's why I feel like it's acceptable in this current day and age to get rid of a child, because I don't think anybody should have to suffer the way that a lot of people do in America currently. Maybe if people weren't actually suffering because of poverty, because of homelessness, etc., then it's you might as well keep the child because you're in a good position. But not unfortunately, a lot of people just aren't in good positions.
Yeah, I want to touch on something you said earlier. So you said that, you think maybe people with my position might want to control women's bodies. And you also mentioned
not
that,
in your position.
Okay.
You're not in power.
Yeah.
But the people
yeah.
in power, that, I do genuinely feel like they do want to, police women's bodies and mainly make sure that they have enough people for the next generation of a working class. Because our population is not populate. When it comes to the next generation, people aren't having kids. And that isn't even just an abortion thing. That's just a general thing.
Yeah.
People aren't having kids because of a lot of people realize the society we live in. It is not they will not be able to make enough money no matter how hard they work. They can work 2 jobs and still not be able to afford a house, food, and on top of that, childcare and all the bills and expenses that comes with that. That's just...
Yeah, so on the controlling women's bodies thing, we actually do that with every single law. We control both women's bodies and men's bodies. For example, if a man came to let me use a different example. If a man came and raped a woman right now, right, the law says he can't do that with his body, right? And even with abortion with a child in the womb, right now it's actually illegal for a man or anyone to give a pregnant woman mifepristone and misoprostol, which are the abortion pills you can use to about 10 to 12 weeks, without her knowledge or her consent. If a man did that and the child inside the woman's womb died as a result, the man would be charged with murder. So we already regulate what people can and can't do with their bodies. We do it all the time. So I would just say we should be consistent and say, okay, if a man gives mifepristone and misoprostol to a woman and it kills her child apart from her consent, we charge the man with murder. Well, then if the woman does that on her own will and choice, well, then she also should be charged with murder. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on the case of if a boyfriend tricked his pregnant girlfriend into taking those pills because he didn't want the child to be born because he didn't want to pay child support or something like that. What do you think the law should be in that case?
Well, in that case, in that specific situation, it feels like the mother actually wanted the child and wanted to keep the child. And I think it's important to remember that when a woman is carrying a child, she could die. There's a possibility she could die. There's extreme changes that happen to her body, and even more so and so on. So that's why I feel it's it should be a woman's choice what she does with the unborn fetus, child, whatever. Of course, I don't personally, majority of people don't have exceptions for the 3rd trimester. That rarely happens, and
just to let you know something real quick, and I'll let you keep going. There are about 10,000 abortions that take place past 20 weeks pregnancy every year in the U.S. So it's not it's super minuscule. I mean, 10,000 is a decent number. Granted, that's only about 1% total of all abortions in the U.S., but 10,000 is still, I'd say, a good amount. But
I would agree. That is a good amount. I don't know those specific statistics on that and how many of those is keeping the health of the mother in mind?
It's going to be pretty much zero, and I'm happy to explain why. Because you mentioned life of the mother, and I do want a quick reply to that, because I think it's an important thing to consider. Because I think we should care for both the pregnant mother and the child. So what I would say is, if a woman has life-threatening complications with the pregnancy, doctors should do everything they can to preserve both lives, at no point intentionally killing either one. So there might be situations where you have to remove the child from the woman's body, because otherwise the mother might die or have a great bodily injury. I'm perfectly fine with doctors performing a C-section or inducing preterm labor or preterm delivery to get the child out of the mother's body to save the life of the mother. And what we ought to do is we ought to try to use our incredible medical technology to keep the child alive outside the woman's body. Mm-hmm. But if unfortunately we had to do a C-section prior to viability in order to save the life of the mother, and we do everything we can to try to keep the child alive, but the child dies unfortunately as a consequence of saving the life of the mother, I don't think anyone should be prosecuted for that. So I would just simply want doctors to care for them both and try to save them both. And in these unfortunate circumstances where a child might die as a result of a preterm delivery or a C-section, I wouldn't want anyone prosecuted there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure about the specifics of, like, I don't know the individual woman's lives and why they're getting a third-term abortion. I think that is kind of like
it's usually
wild.
out of choice in the third trimester. Because another thing is, if you want to do an abortion in the third trimester, it actually takes about 2 to 3 days, whereas a C-section would take about less than an hour. And the reason it takes so long is because you have to actually first inject the child with digoxin, which actually causes the child to have a heart attack and die, and then you have to dilate the cervix, which takes about 2 to 3 days, and then you extract the child dead. Whereas you could just perform a C-section, deliver the child alive, and that would take less than an hour. So that's why if the woman's life is in danger in the third trimester, you actually would, in many cases, be guilty of medical malpractice if you were to actually wait and not just do the C-section, because you're putting that mother's life more at risk by actually waiting and doing the abortion instead of just performing the C-section.
Yeah, I'd have to, like, of course, like 10,000 people, if not more, like getting third-term abortions. I would have to know their specific stories and why. Like, I actually hear them out as to why they're doing it. I personally don't find like that kind of late abortion acceptable.
Yeah.
I would say a majority of people don't. I do genuinely believe that, no matter what side of the political spectrum they're on, or whether or not they believe in Christ or not. But I'd have to hear the perspectives of those specific women as to why they're doing that, to be able to try and grasp the situation that they're in.
Because it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, I do believe that. I can agree with you on that. Because I don't find that particularly acceptable. However, when it comes to like getting an abortion in general, it's just like, yeah, again, like I said, like if they're not in the best situation, like unfortunately, I don't think America's going to change anytime soon when it comes to taking care of the children in society. I don't know. I feel like it should be the woman's choice, and I don't think that they should be like prosecuted for it, because I don't know. People will suffer their whole lives, and I would rather people not suffer at all. Like, I wish that we lived in a society where, like, you know, abortion wasn't something on people's minds. Like it could just be like, oh, we live in a great society. We live in a perfect world for my child. I feel comfortable giving birth here in America, and I feel comfortable with them living in the society. And they're like, we're gonna, like, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, you know, like, and we trust the village. People don't trust the village, unfortunately.
Yeah, I want to mention something. So you mentioned that you don't want anyone to suffer, and I don't either. But I'd say even if we have someone who is suffering or who is going to suffer, I think you and I would both agree the solution to that isn't killing the person who is suffering or who might suffer, right? So like in the case of the child, like if they might have a rough life, if they might suffer, we don't kill them, right? We try to fix the situation. But even in the absence of us being able to fix the situation quickly, like I think we both agree, probably in America, it's going to be hard to fix the situation like that, right, in a snap. But even in the absence of us being able to fix that situation, I think we would both agree, for children outside the womb at least, well, the solution's not to kill the sufferer, it's actually to fix the problem. But I would just want us to be consistent with that then and say, okay, for the child in the womb, even though we might not be able to fix the problem of where they might have some suffering, they might have a rough life, well, we still shouldn't murder them.
That's, I don't know, that's a fair opinion for you to have, especially given your, views on, you know, religion. I just don't find like abortion like early stage to be murder. That's just my opinion on that.
I want to ask you something about that. So it's like third trimester, you said like you don't like that, right?
That's damn near full grown human being. Like.
Yeah, but I would just wonder what do you think is substantially different between the child at say like 25 or 30 weeks, so third trimester, versus like first trimester? Like what does the child gain in like the difference of those 20 weeks where you think, yeah, now it's wrong to kill the child, whereas it's okay earlier?
I don't know like the specifics on it, but I think it's not it's around like mid, probably second trimester, where they're like actually able to like feel things. They feel the mother's emotions, they feel everything, and like they start having like, you know, maybe a little bit of cognitive thought in the third trimester. It's just like anything with like a almost developed brain, anything that can feel anything. I don't fuck with that. Sorry.
You're good. No worries.
I just think that's unacceptable. But when it comes to like the first trimester, or like even like a little bit into this, like I feel like if like it's capable maybe of like feel, because like in the early stages it's just like a clump of cells. It can't really, you know, think or process things, and there's no like super emotional connection to anyone or anything. Like maybe if you told your, like if a girl told her mother like, oh, I'm pregnant, and the mother was like, oh my god, thank goodness I'm getting a grandchild, then there'd be like maybe a little emotional connection there, but I don't know. I feel like if it's the mother's choice, then she should just, you know, be able to do it in those specific circumstances. Again, I don't agree with third term abortion.
Yeah, and what I would say though is if we have someone who's unconscious for a surgery under complete anesthetic, they're not going to feel anything. If someone does something to their body, they're not going to be aware it ever happened. And then say the surgeon actually runs in and rapes the woman who's unconscious and under complete anesthetic. You and I would both say, no, that's absolutely wicked. It's wrong. He needs to be prosecuted for that. And I would actually say he should, in my opinion, I think he should get the death penalty if he raped a woman who's unconscious for a surgery. But if we're going to look there and say, no, you can't do something to someone's body, even if they're never going to know it was done to them, even if they're not going to feel it or be aware that it happened, well, I think we should be consistent with that even and say for a child who is below like 10 weeks or below 8 weeks, even from fertilization, even though they might not know something is done to their body apart from their will, even though they might not feel the pain, it's still wrong to do that to their body.
I can understand where you're coming from with that, but in those specific situations, there's like a full-grown woman that will have like, if like as soon as she learns the knowledge that she was like, you know, R-worded.
But
like,
even suppose that he killed her after the rape though, and she's never aware it happened. You and I would both still say both rape and the murder are wrong, right?
Yes, I would say that. I'd say the difference is like that is like a full-grown human with like that has had like connections to other human beings, has connections to friends, her mother, her grandparents, and all those people are now going to suffer because of her choice, because not her choice, because of whoever murdered her and R-worded her choice. But when it comes to like an unborn child, like nobody's gonna like, besides like the mother, because I'm sure it is like a hard decision for some woman to get rid of a child if she has summed it up in her mind that is a necessary choice that she has to make. The only like nobody is going to suffer in that situation. Only maybe the mother.
You mean if it's like the first trimester?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, even with the case of the woman who's unconscious for the surgery and was raped and murdered, right? I mean, she never suffered in the sense that she didn't feel pain or wasn't aware that it happened, but it was still wrong. And even if, let's say that the woman who's unconscious for the surgery, let's say that she, when that happened, she was raised in the woods with just a father and mother. No one else knew that she was alive, and she was actually unconscious for the surgery because there was a car accident that killed both her mother and her father. Now there's no one who she has a relationship with, no one who knows her. She doesn't have any connections to anyone else. No one is going to mourn the loss of her if she dies. And then that man goes in and rapes and murders her.
I think people will mourn the loss of her. I feel like as soon as people like, there's a lot of people that, you know, it's like even you, I would say, that have like, you know, empathy for other human beings, and would be like, that's wrong. Like that is like wrong, and people would protest over that.
Yeah,
people would make sure that man probably gets killed.
Absolutely. The reason that I mentioned that though, with like the mother and the father had died, is because you had mentioned earlier that like the child in the womb, like the only one who might even know that child exists is the mother, or the only one who might have a relationship to that child was the mother. But in the case of the woman who was unconscious for the surgery and was raped and murdered, which we both say is completely wrong, well, if her mother and father, who were the only people who she had a relationship with, who knew about her, had died, well then, and we both say it's still wrong, well then clearly it's not how many people you have a relationship with or how many people know of your existence that actually gives someone a right to live or a right to not be harmed, right?
Yeah, that's a fair statement to make in that specific situation when it comes to the woman being R-worded, yes. I just don't feel like it's like the same amount of like extremeness when it comes to like an unborn child, unless again third trimester. When it comes to like the first trimester, I just feel like, I don't know. I can't necessarily say that it's like wrong for a woman to do that if she finds it to be like the best possible situation, not only for her health, but like the possible future life of a child if she feels like all she's going to do is give the child like an awful life. She's like, oh, I'm doped up on crack and XYZ, like I don't like there's no point in me bringing a child into this world when I'm not going to be able to take care of it. No one else is going to be able to take care of it nearly as properly as a child should be able to take care of it. Like I feel like that is like a smart decision to make almost, because I don't know, if I wouldn't want to be born into a world where my one parent is doped up, like constantly on drugs, and then, the whole development problem with women who are on drugs and what that does to like a baby alone, et cetera, et cetera. Like I feel like there's a point where it's a smart decision.
Yeah, well, I don't think I'll be able to change your mind, but
Yeah.
what I do want you to just think about later tonight or tomorrow is just what I said about Ephesians 2 verses 8 through 9. What the Catholic Church teaches about faith plus works and trying to work your way to salvation is it's not true. What the Bible actually teaches is it's solely by putting our faith in Christ. And I'd say this, I know you mentioned there was a preacher here or someone here before who had said that even if Hitler had turned from his sin and the day before he died or the minute before he died and put his faith in Christ, that he'd be saved. And that's true. That's what the Bible teaches. It says that we're saved by putting our faith in Christ alone. And when we look at Hitler, we both see someone who's wicked, did some really horrendous, murderous things, killed millions of people. But I would just say he's unrighteous, and so am I, and so are you, and so is everyone. The only person who lived a perfectly righteous life is Jesus Christ. All of us have sinned before God. And if we're standing there with our own track record, our own history of all our sin, and he sees that on us, we're going to be justly condemned to hell. And the only solution for us in our sin problem before God is if we have the perfect righteousness of Christ credited to us. And the only way to have his righteousness credited to us is by putting our faith in him. So that's just something I'd want to leave you with. If there's anything you want me to research or you want to leave me with, tell me to read, I'd love to hear it.
I don't think I'm gonna like change your mind.
Okay.
Like, I'm pretty neutral on like how you feel. Like you could feel the way you feel. I do feel like thinking women should be condemned for getting an abortion is a little extreme, but like there's a lot of people that think like that. I really like it is what it is at this point. I don't think that there's anything that like I could tell you like, hey, you should research this, that will change your mind. I don't think there's anything that you could tell me like, hey, you should research this, that will change my mind. Like I will like look up whatever you tell me to look up. It's just I'm pretty like set in my like opinions and how I feel about certain things, and it's just like these are just some of the things I'm pretty set in because of the life I've led and the people I've met.
Okay. Well, hey, it was a lovely conversation. You were super respectful, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I feel like everybody should be respectful to each other.
Absolutely.
We live one life, guys.
Yeah, we got to find a way to get along, right?
Have a nice day.
You too.